Hi everyone, and welcome to the predictions based on astrology for the week of July 29, 2019. First, let's do a quick recap of the prediction for the previous week, July 22nd. So, my predictions as far as the directions of the stock market pretty much were correct for every day of the week, with perhaps mixed results for Wednesday, but otherwise it was correct as far as Monday through Wednesday. My prediction was up, and it was up on Monday and Tuesday, and like I said, Wednesday Nasdaq was up, but Dow Jones was down. Then on Thursday I predicted the market to go down, and it did. Friday I predicted the market will be up, and it was up. So on some of the ongoing predictions that I have are the increased situations where we have a lot of volcanoes maybe erupting or strong earthquakes, etc. So we did have continuing strong earthquakes, and again 5s and 6, nothing beyond that I don't think, but I do expect increase in those to come in around September and early October, and then subsequently in January of 2020. However, there was also some news last week about the volcano beginning to erupt in West Java, which is the most populated Indonesian province. So the whole time of 2019-2020 should see increase in such activities, and some particular times of the year, like I said, 2019-2020, we'll see an even stronger sort of push for those. And right now, this week, I wouldn't think it was the strongest. However, all the build-up will continue to accumulate, and I would say September, October would be the next, early October would be the next big, potentially outburst. So other ongoing predictions that I had that were kind of on for the entire week, especially for July 23rd, were increased in news regarding like navy, water, pharmaceuticals, oil, any sort of pollution, drugs, chemicals, etc. And we had some news along those lines where we had news about Iranian cargo ship sinking in Caspian Sea on the 26th. There's also news that in India, Army and Navy were called to save 700 people stranded on the flooded train. There was also some news here that I forgot to paste, which I don't know what that was. Something else important happened on the 23rd, apparently. Let's see. There's also some news about that have to do, I guess, with the Pluto conjuncting Saturn, manifestation of Pluto conjuncting Saturn that's currently transiting. This conjunction is currently transiting through Capricorn, so that would have to do with like nuclear waste, things that happen on the ground, or secret activities, and specifically activities that involve like rocks, minerals, actual mountains, etc. And there was news apparently that there was a nuclear plant in South Carolina where they were storing some waste, uranium, I guess, waste in a container that was rusty and started to leak, and there was some, I guess, the increased radiation, and some news about the contaminated sludge leaking into a soil. So unfortunately, with the Pluto signifying like nuclear related materials, and Saturn signifying kind of problems, losses, basically death even. Of course, Pluto also signifies death. We can certainly expect these kind of news to continue. And with these planets moving slowly in the background, that sort of a probability of such events increasing and kind of getting perhaps even worse and worse as these two planets become closer and closer to each other is something to basically continue to be on the lookout for through, I would say, 2020 at least. So let's see, another news that kind of is a combination of these two influences, I would say. They focus, on the Neptunian issues with like Navy, oil, etc., as well as with Saturn and Pluto coming together often, or forming hard aspects often at times of really major disasters that affect economy, and perhaps require strong intervention. Pluto rules things like total transformation, where something needs to be, some approach, old approach needs to be completely changed. And Saturn also comes in often where there's like a large, not large, but rather new development in, say, science. So again, you need to really develop totally new approach to kind of take it to the next leap, to the next, I guess, level rather, to fix, the old problem. And so the event that I'm talking about is apparently something that's been in development for years. I personally learned about it last week because it was in the news last week. And that there was an abandoned tanker in Red Sea near Yemeni coast, some sort of a port, Las Isa, I guess, something like that. And that ship was abandoned there, not abandoned, but stranded there since 2015. But because it wasn't really maintained, it is now in fairly dire condition, and it may even explode. And if it does, about I think it says here 1 million barrels of oil may spill into the ocean, and if the conditions are sort of right, that spill may even reach the Suez Canal, which would of course affect global economy. So if indeed something like that were to happen, like I said, the time that to look out for would be September through early October, where we will have increased probability of news. If it's not something like this, it would be, maybe hurricane in, let's say, the Gulf Coast in the US. So something along the lines of natural disasters that will also involve contamination of water, oil, or chemicals, etc. Let's see, there is also the news that I made for last week that there would be increased focus on like international relations, as well as sort of important famous individuals, politicians, and particularly the 23rd, again, I highlighted as an important day in general of sorts of various news and events. And indeed, on Tuesday, the 23rd, in the UK, they named the new British Prime Minister. And so jumping a little bit to this week of 29th, this week, the focus on the famous individuals, politicians, actors, etc., people who are individually famous just for being who they are, in some sort of positions of power, being on the stage, will continue. So there may be sort of more announcements along the lines of what we just had, where maybe a new leader is announced, or a particular, like I said, actor, for example, becomes famous again for being who they are. So maybe they achieve some sort of a recognition for, maybe performing or even engaging in political activities, etc. So or vice versa, a politician may be recognized for, starring in some role or something. So let's see. Another prediction that I made was that there would be increase on the 28th, which was Sunday, the 29th, Monday. But I made that prediction last week. The increased focus on financial institutions and banks, and there will be some surprising news about like digital currencies or finance and or aerospace, gold, or solar power. And I'm recording right now, it's actually the 29th, but I have seen some news both over the weekend and on Monday that there were one event actually occurred last week on July 25th, that at the airport, so this has to do with aerospace, there was this heist in Brazil where they stole about $29 million worth of gold. And on the 28th, which is Sunday, there was news about the Rock Sioux tribe in the US, so Indian tribe in the US, basically a native Indian tribe in the US. They had built a huge solar farm next to the controversial pipeline. And also on Monday, the 29th, news had come out about several banks, such as JP Morgan, Barclays, and UBS, that are named in the UK class action 1 billion, basically Forex rigging suit. So those have come sort of to pass. There was another prediction that I made that also had to do with specifically currencies, especially digital currencies, and that was for the 25th of July, and I was expecting that there may be some volatility in, like I said, currencies, and indeed on that day, and again, I don't really follow, and I specifically try to actually not follow news about like which committee is going to present, report on what, because I actually don't want that to affect my predictions. I specifically only want to use astrological charts, transits, progressions, etc. And on that day, there was actually fairly large move in euro, where it went first it went down, and that was, I guess, on the expectations of the ECB statement being dovish, and then I guess after the ECB statement was issued that they will keep interest rates unchanged, there was a strong spike back up. So there was indeed strong volatility in the euro value, and that's exactly what I saw also astrologically, that would come up. Another let's see, interesting development. So I predicted again for the 28th, 29th of July, so Sunday of last week, Monday of this week, that there may be some surprising development where there may be, that they may involve either international situations involving like transportation or communication, where we may experience delays, disconnect, conflict, etc. And on the 29th, there was news about the messaging app Slack being down in Europe, US, I guess America, so maybe more than just US, and Japan. There was also a prediction that I made, which I guess would apply both to last week but also this week, about the ongoing heat wave, and that's again, we're jumping in a little bit in predictions for this week. The heat wave continues in many parts of Europe, like in Russia, they have raging fires in Siberia as well as in the US, and that has to do with just lots of planets being in which are the fire signs, in particular in Leo, and we have Mars in Leo, that's making a sort of a trine, positive aspect, harmonious aspect to Jupiter in its own side of Sagittarius, which also happens to be a fire sign, and of course Jupiter has to do with things just kind of expanding and, you know, growing larger and larger, and so all this kind of a fiery, warm, in fact hot energy with, you know, Leo being the sun sign continues to expand, and it's not going to be going away quite just yet. And so that's obviously, we have this in the news last week, and I think it's continuing into this week's news. And finally, I had made some specific predictions for China, where there's an ongoing prediction, but I specifically highlighted for last week, July 22nd through 26th, with increased focus on international relations, contracts, and agreements, and that there may be some, some focus on the either weapons or buildup of weapons, show of strength, and or that the country may feel attacked, not necessarily physically, but through some aggressive negotiations and agreements. And indeed, on the 24th of July, China had released a white paper on national defense, where they stated their new plans to build world-class army, I think. And some analysts have described that this paper presented an open strategic challenge to the US. So it is interesting, the prediction was made based on Mars transiting over Mars in China's chart in the 7th house of partnerships, and, you know, open enemies as well. And of course, Mars have to do with military, weapons, etc. And at the same time, this week, throughout the 26th through 31st of July, we will have transiting Mars going over Pluto in China's chart. So we're going from these kind of open declarations of, you know, showing strength openly, to Pluto leading, Pluto really giving us this kind of a hidden and manipulative vibe, where first maybe there was this announcement and show of strength openly, but there may be something going on that may or may not be necessarily made public, where there's a show of strength, or will be a show of strength sort of through some either hidden means or manipulations or some power plays. And so let's see, there was also, like I said, ongoing prediction that has been sort of an influence in China's chart for many months and will continue on for some months to come. That has to do with Pluto going over China's Jupiter in the 12th house and in Capricorn. So Capricorn has to do with, again, both the government, but also with, again, stone and sort of mountains or things that are hard and kind of you need to work really sort of be disciplined and work hard at making sort of move the mountains or dig through the mountains or excavate something or mine. And both Jupiter and Jupiter being in the 12th house highlight things like navy, oil, as well as pharmaceuticals, healthcare, etc. As well as any sort of hidden secretive activities as well. And Pluto basically brings transformation to all of that, as well as Pluto has to do with things that again are hidden, occur underground, etc. So hence my sort of predictions about potentially increased focus on like oil or any secretive hidden activities, as well as like some major changes in healthcare approaches, etc. So last week, there was news that on the 7/25th, China's oil giant PetroChina had finally completed a project where they dug a nearly 9-kilometer deep oil well on land. So I guess it's the largest, at least I guess either in China or in Asia. So extremely deep. And that again, this is like definitely a good sort of example of manifestation of this transit to China's chart, and that's something that again, because it's a very slow aspect, it definitely had to take some months. It's been, I guess, in the making for over a year, this particular project that they just completed, but it will continue this kind of influence or such similar projects, or where, you know, these industries are being transformed in China and that they're kind of developing and expanding. Jupiter has to do with expanding things, you know, expanding maybe their navy, and or expanding, you know, oil production, etc. That will continue on for some months to come. And unfortunately, also with that comes a probability of maybe some, or increased probability of some disasters as well, because that's sort of what those planets may also symbolize. It could be either some hidden, you know, leak, hidden contamination, or something that occurs in secrecy underground, but also changing attitude towards the kind of waste recycling pollution. I think maybe that was one of the news pieces that I had forgotten to paste here in my little note here, where I guess there was some review that China had initiated about some waste recycling policies or something like that, that come, you know, waste that comes from other countries. So moving on to this week, I'll fill in the gaps. I had already mentioned a few things, such as, you know, ongoing hot weather, for example, and, you know, some surprising news about like currencies or banks on Monday, which seem to have already come through. So other ongoing predictions, like I said, there are increase in earthquakes, increase in focus on navy, oil, pharmaceuticals, as well as for China, continuing focus on like earthquakes, various potential disasters, especially hidden or involving like chemical spills, pollution, etc., and waste recycling. There's also new prediction for specifically week of the July 29th. Like I said, continuing, not continue, but rather increased probability this week specifically, where there may be increased focus on actors, celebrities, politicians, as well as locations that have to do with these, you know, areas such as theaters, movies, casinos, racetracks, as well as hot weather, fires, explosions, firearms, etc. So perhaps something like fire in California affects, you know, homes of Hollywood celebrities, or some famous theater, you know, catches fire. So hot weather, but specifically the fire may occur like at the casino, racetrack, movie theater, something that's like is a large stage of some sort. So moving on to the market direction predictions, Monday I give it about 60% chance of market going up, and at this time I've seen the market, I think, ended up being mixed with, I think Nasdaq was down and Dow Jones was up. Additionally, some surprise developments related to finance, currencies, as well as prominent individuals such as politicians and celebrities, aerospace, gold, and solar power, which, as I mentioned already, that there was some news about a class action suit against some banks involved in potentially Forex rigging. And there may also be, my prediction goes that there may also be possible escalation in the situations involving like transportation, oil, water, navy, airplanes, and weapons. And there may be some issues arising in communication, international communication and transportation, where it would be leading to some delays, disconnects, conflicts. Like I said, Slack messaging app was down, so that would affect a lot of businesses who use that for communications. Let's see. And the solutions to kind of fixing those potential issues may be surprising or some sort of unconventional, and may require some agreement among leaders on how to proceed. So sometimes, issues lead to developing unusual solutions. I have not seen any news about that, but I will have to research that for next week overview. For US, for July 29th, 30th, I think there may be increased news about partnerships, contracts, agreements, and status of the US in the world arena, specifically focusing on businesses that have to do with communication transportation, such as cars and airplanes and phones. So basically, there's a lot of emphasis even the whole week for the US and specifically on those industries. So I don't know if it would be something like, more tariffs are coming on, say, international, cars or international items or items that are built internationally, such as phones or anything that has to do with communication transportations. And, or, of course, we have Boeing continuing to experience difficulties. So maybe some contracts, I'm not sure exactly, will be dropped or some problems. But basically, communication transportation industry will be significant, especially for the US, especially 29th and 30th. In relation to sort of international contracts, agreements, or tariffs, and basically sales. For China, 26th and 31st, as I mentioned, especially the 29th, as I already mentioned before, will be significant with the transiting Mars passing over its Pluto in the 7th house of negotiations, contracts, partnerships, etc. So again, also increased focus on for China on negotiations with international partners, contracts, agreements of various sorts, and or sort of power posturing against what are perceived to be their enemies. And so this time with Pluto kind of being present, the focus may be on like nuclear power or waste processing or recycling, or just it may involve some sort of blackmail, hidden communication, some secretive activities, spying, etc. The show of strength may be again by showing strength in nuclear power, something like that, or through some hidden means. But again, this may involve again something military, weapons related focus. On Tuesday, I think the market may go down about 60% chance, and there may be increased news about changes in corporate government relationship, leadership, earthquakes, mudslides, as well as food safety, farming safety, security of banks' assets, and real estate. So there may be some sort of problems in those areas. There may also be increased news about some sort of public conflict or public between two public figures, one of which is a female, like a mother-like female, and the other one would be an older established male leader, and that may be either in a corporation somewhere or in government. And the argument or this conflict may involve safety of children or homeland security. So basically, who is kind of a better protector, what is the right way to do to protect them, and the public may favor woman and her position because, again, just being more popular at that particular time. So this conservative, kind of an older male, perhaps, or just being conservative, not necessarily older, versus a woman kind of being perceived more like motherly and more caring and nurturing, and like the public may support that kind of a more nurturing, supporting sort of point of view. And again, may not be a woman, maybe just somebody who comes across from that or brings about that motherly kind of aspect where let's take care of things, let's protect sort of children and homeland. And let's see, Wednesday, I think very like, I'm not exactly sure, but I think about 55% chance that the market may go down. Let's see. And on July 31st through August 1st, there may be, again, greater than usual EUR-USD and or other currency fluctuations, especially on July 31st. Same days, July 31st through 1st, there may be additional surprises about like currencies, banks, financial institutions, earnings, as well as politicians, actors, sort of any famous individuals or like famous again for just like their name is recognized, you know, and or also again aerospace, solar power, and gold, those same areas. So we may have another sort of spike in news involving these areas, and the value of some currency or gold or earnings from especially a movie or some, say, racing or gaming industry, anything that's like involves risk or sort of gaming, like I said, something that's fun, etc., and involves, you know, gambling. The news may be that the earnings may be unexpected or are down, or there may be some surprising unforeseen developments. Maybe, like I said, earnings estimates are off, or the currency suddenly loses value, or there's some volatility in the value up and down, or there are concerns about stability, for example, you know, financial institution stability, and or some famous like movie actor or politician loses a large sum of money. So those kind of surprising, unexpected news, we may expect a spike of those July 31st through August 1st. Then on August 1st, Thursday, slight chance of market going back up, 55%, and on Friday, August 2nd, slightly stronger probability, about 60% that the market will go up. And for sort of, just to kind of round this up, for individuals, you know, because of, like I said, so many planets are in fire signs, and particularly in Leo this week, with Mars nicely trining to Jupiter in its own sign of Sagittarius, I guess this will be a good time for doing things that again align with that fire energy. So, you know, I don't know, being on the stage, dancing, kind of taking part in some sort of sports activities, or doing things proactively and not sitting basically around, going out, you know, about and having fun. And that's sort of what Leo is also about, having fun, showing your uniqueness, showing sort of your inner light. And so doing those activities would be rewarding. And so I would imagine, especially individuals who have a lot of planets or some important points in their horoscope in those signs, will feel kind of extra gregarious, uplifted, cheerful, kind of more, you know, happy perhaps than usual. And so even people who don't have necessarily a lot of fire energy in their horoscope, they may still want to take advantage and kind of do things that if they were too afraid to, say, participate in, I don't know, activity that, say, some sort of improv class or something, that it's a great time to go ahead and do that. And because there will be a lot of just that energy will be beneficial for kind of showing your unique sides or being out there, kind of presenting something and not being afraid of basically doing something out there that puts people in front of others. So that's about it, and let's see what else this week holds for us, and I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll come back more next week. Okay, catch you all guys later.